I actually can't see like that, so hang on one second. All right. The X-Men teaser for Avengers Doomsday has been out for a while now, and as a longtime Cyclops fan, I'm hyped if for nothing else than to see James Marsden in the classic costume, releasing one of the most epic optic blasts we've ever glimpsed on screen. We've actually had a lot of interesting interpretations of Cyclops' signature mutant power over the last 26 years. Oh my god, the first X-Men movie came out that long ago. Jeez, cue the gif of aging Matt Damon. Being a huge X-Man and Cyclops and fan of special effects and behind-the-scenes stories, I thought it would be fun in the wake of this new look at his power to go back through the big screen history of the optic blast, analyze how they were implemented and served the story, how they match the comics, and rank them, because why not? That'll make this fun. Thanks for clicking my video. Before we get started, I really need you to click that subscribe button below if you are new. This is The Fascinating Frame, where I take a look at some of the more unique behind-the-scenes stories and fantastic connections between film, TV, and games. And if you specifically like this video, I did a similar one last year all about how Wolverine's claws were created for the X-Men movies and the injuries Hugh Jackman sustained because of them. You should check that out. This month, I'm also launching a second channel, Back in Time, Retro Movie Soundtracks, so if you're a fan of those and want to hear behind-the-scenes stories about their creations, hop on over there. With all that out of the way, I go by Rick online, and let's start blasting. Hang on, just really can't see. Okay, ready? Growing up as a kid with poor eyesight, who was made fun of a lot because of having glasses, I really gravitated towards Cyclops. Here was a superhero whose power was their eyesight, something I was self-conscious of, but who also got to wear very cool eyewear. In fact, over the years, I would buy several pairs of ruby red sunglasses, especially after seeing James Marsden rock a pair of cool shades in the first X-Men movie. I was very excited for that movie as it was coming out. I downloaded the teaser on QuickTime so I could replay it again and again, going frame by frame. And remember, this was the year 2000, so that process took hours. No YouTube back then. Wolverine was the real highlight of that teaser, but we did get a few shots of Cyclops and his visor, but with none of the finished effects added yet. There's a few flashes of red as he's aiming around in one shot. And that's a common technique employed on set to help ground VFX into the real world more. Having real bursts of practical light on set made blending in a computer effect look more real. And I remember thinking at the time that the black outfits were actually cool. This movie was released after Batman and Robin ruined colorful comic book movies for a while. And The Matrix was out like the year before, so all black was in. But Cyclops' visor looked pretty good, if not a little bulky in the ears, like there's these large like Princess Leia buns on the side where the dial is. But nevertheless, I was so ready to see what an optic blast was going to look like on the big screen. I have memories of reading reviews of X-Men right after the movie came out, calling it an excellent translation of a very complicated property to the big screen that nonetheless lacked a bit of punch. And for the first outing of Cyclops on screen and his optic blasts, this is true as well. An overall successful effect that still looks decent today, true to the comics, but lacking some of the big oomph and how it's used in the movie, with a couple of exceptions. The first optic blast we get to see is in the snow rescue scene with Storm and Sabretooth. There was a lot riding on this shot being the first time we would see Cyclops' power, and looking back today, it definitely underwhelms. I like the anticipation. There's this wide-eyed shot from Sabretooth and a brief charge up at the visor before the shot comes out. But overall, it's much too brief and doesn't really do much. Sabretooth just kind of floats away and that's it. It really lacks like that decisively fight-ending quality that the first optic blast of the original cartoon had.
Here's one from a pro.
Like, even if the movie needed Sabretooth to escape, I think they could have gone bigger. Like, this is the first blast. Like, come on. Also, in the middle of the blast, there's like this extra shot of Sabretooth turning in the edit that's always annoyed me. Here's my cut without it and less time of Sabretooth floating in the air. Still too quick on screen, but I think that flows better, being an editor myself. As a special effects and Cyclops superfan, I have a high standard. At least the effect looks good, especially combined with all the practical explosions. The snow kicking up at the camera is a nice touch. And then we get another use of his power cutting the seatbelt. I think it was very smart of them to show the range of Cyclops' ability right off the bat.
It was good that there was a range to it, that, you know, that like it could be this concussive beam of force that could blow the roof off of a train station and also be, you know, razor thin.
See, he gets it. Thanks, James. But that was just the first outing. B, could have been bigger. Next up is the training montage. Again, I like that the movie is showing how Cyclops can use his powers other than just like a big blast. He's very fast and precise. But one of the problems that starts to become apparent with these movies is they have a hard time getting Cyclops to move around while using his abilities. Something that isn't going to be solved for quite a few years. Like, I would have loved it if he could have been like running a little obstacle course here, tracking and blasting the targets out of the air. I think that was in the range of what the effects could do at the time, but maybe budget and time would have certainly been an issue. Another B. But don't worry, the first A is on deck. The train station shot is hands down my favorite visual effect in the first movie. There's nothing held back from the sequence, both from Cyclops himself and the VFX team. Visual effects supervisor Michael Fink has worked on some of the most visually impressive movies over the course of his career.
The major responsibility of a visual effects supervisor is to make sure that story the director's trying to tell and the vision that's being conveyed in the movie is unified.
But for this movie, he really understood the need for Cyclops' optic blast to have a basis in reality. And for that, he brilliantly looked towards water.
The beam has the force of a hugely powerful flow of water. It is not a laser beam. It doesn't blow things up by heat or any kind of incendiary action. It blows things up by the force of itself hitting them.
I personally love the insert shot on his eyes sparkling.
This is the element we're using to bring the colors of red and white and forward propulsion.
And the way it feels like there is a real wave of force being pushed outwards towards the ceiling.
When the beam hits the ceiling, it splashes, just like water would splash against the ceiling and spread sideways.
So not only does treating Cyclops' optic blast like a fire hose of force help convert this fantastical power into something tangible that the VFX artists can model the effect after.
Particles are what a lot of people use to create procedural animation.
Yeah, natural phenomenon like falling water,
right.
Smoke.
Again, just trying to push the idea of liquid.
But it also helps the audience relate more to the special effect, even if all of this is just happening like subconsciously. You know, the old, you might not have noticed, but your brain did. That's why I feel like these 25-year-old effects from this movie are still more believable than, say, other movies from that era. This approach also shows how Michael Fink did his research into how Cyclops' optic blasts work in the comics, but we'll get to more of that later. So yeah, a great effect, showing the raw power of Cyclops. A. Moving through towards the end of the movie, though, is where the sidelining of Cyclops as a character starts being noticed. I think it was inevitable that Wolverine was always going to steal the show, but Cyclops has always been a great yin to Logan's yang.
Teacher's pet got cold feet. Anytime, pretty boy.
But here, Cyke is just plain left out of most of the action and fights at the end. I do love this other precision shot where he blasts the slime off Jean's face.
Don't move.
Great insert of the dial, and I love how the camera tracks down the path of the blast. That was a smart choice. Like, if it's too hard or expensive to have Cyclops move around while using his power, then move the camera to make it more interesting. B+. Other than that, he gets a couple of shots off in the Statue of Liberty's head, somehow still getting trapped even though they established earlier how fast of a shot he is. Then we get the shot that Jean Grey redirects towards Sabretooth.
Drop something.
This reinforces the fire hose aspect of the optic blast and the way it can be manipulated through the visor. Plus, it's a nice combination between two characters' powers, something else the early movies don't explore enough. This is easily the second best blast in the movie, but it is a shame that the two marquee examples of Cyclops' ability aren't when he is fully in control.
You better close your eyes.
It makes his weakness as a character more noticeable. I also have a nitpick in the way Sabretooth floats through the air again a little too long after being hit.
I'm taking it.
And finally, we get his weak little shoulder tap to end the movie. Yawn. C. Special effects don't happen in a vacuum. They need good characters and writing to back them up, and this movie sort of failed Cyclops.
You're a dick.
Barely a leader,
Okay.
almost no backstory or development,
I'll take care of them.
and out of control for his best sequences. It's funny, while writing this, I realized that the uncontrollable nature of his powers would actually help him relate to Rogue's situation a lot more in the movie than, say, Wolverine. But those two characters never speak to each other throughout the entire series. And unfortunately, this character oversight only gets worse.
This facility is a school.
Sure it is.
The Cyclops sidelining becomes a huge issue for me in the second movie, which is a huge shame because not only is it still my favorite of all the films, but they did something extra special with Cyclops' optic blasts. Something that put these effects over the line into the A and A+ territory. It's actually superb sound design. Sound design can be equally, if not more important to grounding CGI effects in reality as incorporating those practical effects we saw earlier, lighting and real destruction. Michael Fink returns as the VFX supervisor and continues the fire hose approach to the optic blast visuals, but the sound department added a much deeper sound to the effect this time around. That lower frequency bass that has been added to the optic blast sounds extraordinary. It makes his ability so much more real and dangerous, like there's a real power behind it. I think moving the sound away from the more sci-fi laser-like sounds worked to bring the optic blast better into reality as well. Also, this opening scene with Cyclops is great. He gets to show off a little hand-to-hand skills, and he can move around. A far cry from what they did in the latest cartoon revival, but at least it's something going on to make it look like Scott has a little bit more training here. All right, A-. All right, so then we just have to go through, about an hour and a half of movie before we get back to Cyclops. There we go. A couple more shots here with that excellent deep sound. God, I love hearing that. I like how his beam bends a little here as he's thrown back. But now we get the cream of the crop, the A+ optic blast. Let's go. Even though there's not a lot of movement going on here, the straight-on steady shots of his blast going full force on screen is just so cool to see. And again, it's the sound that really makes it for me. Just listen to that. It's almost like they mixed in an animal growl. Like they did with the T-Rex in Jurassic Park.
Alligator, low frequency, really low. So hear how it'll be the low frequency element of the final roar.
It sounds like its own powerful animal, and you can actually believe it's there and a real danger to Jean Grey. My other favorite part of this concentrated shot is the way his blast sort of spills out of his visor before focusing back in, the same way a lot of the comics showed his optic blast coming out. This is the longest we get Cyclops on screen just using his power, but the way it looks and sounds easily makes this my favorite shot of all the movies. Only negative is that, yet again, Scott really isn't in control here. He's being mind controlled to attack Jean, come on. Still an A+ shot, even though these movies seem to be increasingly bored of Cyclops. Also, a quick shout out to costume designer Louise Minnenbach for removing the bulky earpieces of the visor. It really looks cool and slick and something you could actually wear outside without looking like an idiot. I'm actually surprised at myself for not having bought a replica of those yet.
Who will you stand with?
But of course, X2 has nothing on X3 in the way Cyclops is mistreated. Behind the scenes, this movie was a mess, and I won't get into all the details here, but basically, Singer had a once-in-a-lifetime chance to direct a new Superman movie whose production conflicted with X3, and he took a whole mess of the production team with him, including James Marsden.
I spent the night with Superman.
Now, Marsden had always felt like there wasn't enough space in these movies for Cyclops to shine, and with his new conflict in shooting Superman, his role was cut way down. 2 scenes and 1 optic blast. And I don't like it. This is where the movie starts getting very inconsistent with the effects, in a way that I think is worse. Brett Ratner and the visual effects team in this movie, missing Michael Fink, created a lot more cartoony effects. Don't get me wrong, there's some impressive sequences, but this movie dialed the needle more towards fantasy than the reality of the first 2. It's the Batman Forever of the X-Men movies, if that makes sense. You can see this happening in the one and only optic blast in this movie. First, the sound is a lot more laser-like, high-pitched and something like a phaser as opposed to a hose. You also notice the cone of his beams for his eyes are much narrower. We're missing all that great sparkling detail and large spread that made the train shot look so good in X1. So, your eye is convex, right? Meaning that if power was emanating out of it, it should spread in an arc. I don't want to be too CinemaSins-y about this. That's not the point. But if you compare the thought that went into making the blast in the first 2 movies look and behave like a real force, then this just kind of pales in comparison. The water effects are all CGI too, and the fact that this isn't actually doing anything in the story makes this a C+. This is the end of James Marsden, for now. But before we move on, let's pull back and go over exactly what Cyclops' optic blasts are, because from here on out, the movies get less and less consistent between each other and the comics. For those who don't know, Cyclops' optic blasts, as explained by Michael Fink earlier, are not lasers and contain no actual heat. Scott Summers' eyes are actually portals to another dimension, a dimension of pure energy called, no joke, the punch dimension.
My eyes are portals to the punch dimension, which is a world of pure concussive force, and it comes out through my eyes.
Well, that's dumb.
Now, I think every movie can have its own interpretations as they need. I don't think everything has to be one-to-one to the comics. But if the movie is straying too far from what's been established in order to meet its own needs, then you run into problems making all of this believable, which is what happens with the next movie on our list. X-Men Origins Wolverine faced a lot of criticism for its bad CGI.
You're safe.
And its treatment of Cyclops' optic blasts can't be left out of the discussion. Even though the 2 shots of his power look completed, thankfully, I'm not a fan of either of them. First, the movie is clearly writing backwards from the final Deadpool confrontation. How are Sabretooth and Wolverine supposed to beat someone with an indestructible adamantium skeleton? Well, heat works.
The tricky thing about adamantium is keep it hot, because once the metal cools, it's indestructible.
Where can they get heat? Let's just use Cyclops' power. Then we can force him in as a cameo in the movie too. See, they're changing the effect, not because it made sense as to how they were thinking about bringing it alive for the movie, but to fix a later plot hole. The sound design is more of a high-pitched whistle, which I find annoying. And look at the scene where Sabretooth attacks Scott in school. It's a completely CGI building. No other actors around to react to this destruction. So even though it looks impressive at first, it doesn't have a tangible impact on the viewer. And then in the Weapon X facility, it's not much better. The soldiers he hits just disappear video game style. All of this looks better than a lot of the other CGI in this movie, but it has no substance. C. Before we get into the Tyler Sheridan movies, I want to point out a change from the comics they made with Cyclops' absence in First Class and Days of Future Past that I like. Traditionally, Havok's power signature, the colors and the way his powers look distinct in the comics, is a yellow circular blast. In these movies, they wanted a blaster like Cyclops, but the character was too young for the time period, so they changed Alex Summers from Scott's younger brother to older, and they turned his power signature red to match Cyclops. I like these changes from the comic. It created a visual relationship for the audience even before we knew whether or not they were going to even introduce Cyclops. Good changes, makes sense. These are great movies, and it just kind of sucks that Cyclops got rotated out for them.
Good to see you, Scott.
Some believe that the first mutant was born thousands of years ago.
Unfortunately, the Tyler Sheridan era of Cyclops doesn't fix too many of the character problems around him. Scott is part of a very crowded field, and because this is a younger version, we don't really get any of the leadership qualities that have been absent from the beginning. But boy, do we get a lot of optic blasts. Are they good? Looking at the bathroom sequence, we've got a much better setup than the school in Origins. First, there's more people around to actually be threatened by the onset of Scott's uncontrollable power. That's actually very important. Like, part of believing CGI is believing that there are actual stakes in the world. Great sound design makes a comeback here. It's not the same as my favorite in X2, but it's such an improvement over Origin's high whistle. But the real treat in this scene are the ancillary sounds. You can really hear the optic blast tearing up like individual tiles in his bathroom. Stuff is breaking apart and falling, and you can hear every piece of it. A-. The same goes for the next scene on the mansion grounds. If you've ever shot a garden hose full blast into the ground as a kid, or as an adult for fun, I don't judge. This sounds exactly like that. Only with the decibels turned way up. You can almost feel it kicking up the dirt, and that's thanks to the sound team. I love this stuff. If I could go back to school and start over and focus on something else, I'd go and learn more like Foley and sound design from the start. It's so important and fun. The other part of this scene that works really well to sell the effect is all the other actors. I love how Scott cuts off Professor X.
There's nothing to be afraid of. It's quite...
I love the people screaming, running for their lives. Like, yes, those elements make a good scene overall, but are extra important in a big VFX moment. People are scared of his powers. A. The only things I don't like about the optic blasts of this movie is we get the narrower eye beams without the visor again. This is a completely untrained Scott Summers too, so you'd think they'd be even wider and more out of control. Also, they're a little inconsistent in whether or not they are producing heat. Sometimes you get fire trails and sometimes not. I guess you could say that sometimes the force of the blast is causing friction where it hits a surface and that's creating heat. At least that's how I can rationalize it for this one. It's not the end of the world. On to the fight with Storm. Not too much to add here, except I like how their inexperience in fighting comes through. I actually think it fits Scott's character here that he keeps missing and his shots are wild. But then we get one of my least favorite lazy movie moves, the power match. It's what I like to call it when two characters just face off and shoot their powers at each other until someone wins. It's supposed to visualize like a battle of the wills or something, but usually I find that a movie will do it just as a shortcut in an action scene. And the one in X2 gets a pass from me because there's actually stuff going on story-wise with Jean's power and the push and pull that's going on in the scene. And while it looks kind of cool where the optic blast is meeting Storm's lightning, nothing much else is happening or resolves, so B+. And unfortunately, this is a preview of the weakest scene in the movie involving Cyclops. I hate the end fight against Apocalypse in this movie. It's like they ran out of ideas or time and money to do something more interesting, and Scott is one of the worst offenders in this scene. He's just standing there trying to shoot Apocalypse, and it's unclear what effect he's even having in this fight. Like with Jean in X2, you could tell that it was a seriously dangerous moment. Here it's like, I don't know what is happening. Tyler tries to sell it by screaming at one point, but then he gets tired and gives up. I never understood why he just stops and put his glasses back on. I guess because the writers just needed a moment where it looks like the X-Men are losing. Also funny in this scene is Beast, who doesn't have a ranged ability and is forced to just break Scott out of his little sand binds, before Scott heroically goes back to missing a stationary target. Yikes. Besides one very brief shot of a blast from Scott's perspective, this whole sequence gets a C from me. At least we get the final visor shot. Last movie of this video is going to be The Dark Phoenix, the movie that answers the question of whether the same writer can screw up the same storyline 10 years apart. Too bad they didn't keep those uniforms, and instead the movie decided to buy costumes from Temu. First up is the Blackbird turret shot. In the beginning, it really looked like this movie was going to be actually fun and creative. The X-Men go to space. Great.
Scott, I need you to blast that thruster.
Cyclops has a gunner seat in the Blackbird he can use to shoot outside. Brilliant. It's a really fun idea, except he's hitting this other shuttle to slow it down, right? But the area he hits it in its rotation would only speed it up in real life, right? Like it's turning clockwise, right? And the blast hits the shuttle here, and somehow it slows down. Like, even if he's supposed to be, quote, taking out the thruster, that's not how movement works in space. There's perpetual motion. You know what? I'm not doing it. I'm not becoming that guy. I'm not doing it. I'm moving on. B+ for creativity. Also, my son's rocket ship was the only prop I could find for this section. Excuse me. Next up, we have the street fight. Hey, they finally realized Cyclops has feet.
Kurt, I need you!
I like this sequence best in the movie because at least you have mutants trying to use their powers against each other in different ways. And I love the shot where you can actually hear the beam cutting through the various scenery and Magneto's shield. This is all good stuff, but the very best shot happens towards the end. But I need to set it up real quick. So the first X-Men comics I ever bought were while I was on a beach vacation and went into a comic shop. They had the Uncanny X-Men Murder World issues. This was my first experience with the X-Men, and these issues had this fun setup where the villain Arcade trapped everyone in these specialized scenarios where each character had to figure out unique ways to use their powers to escape. Well, at one point, Cyclops finds himself in this room full of deadly bumper cars and does this. Like, holy dude, I was mesmerized by that panel. This showed just how smart Cyclops was as a character, too. For a nerd with glasses, this was the ultimate validation, and I instantly felt a connection with Cyclops.
Storm, fry him.
But this is how the movies failed him so much.
A bolt of lightning into a huge copper conductor. I thought you lived at a school.
But finally, we get a bank shot. Yes, thank you. Not just someone else redirecting his power either, but Cyclops himself, in control, making a trick shot. Come on, was that so hard? A. Would have been A+ if it was longer or if there were more of them.
What are you doing?
What Raven would have.
Finally, the train sequence. I'm not a fan, but here we have a bunch of aliens dressed like completely normal people who can take 100 bullets, but Kurt's pointy tail kills them. Okay. There's a lot of optic blasts going on in this sequence, but it's quantity over quality. I'm not invested in the scene, and therefore the visual effects are just that, mindless VFX. I do like this over-the-shoulder shot we get. It makes you feel like you're in a Gears of War game, but with Cyclops. B-, B at best. It's clear that what matters most about creating a good optic blast is more than just does it look good. Sure, being faithful to the comics, having a good design idea, and great sound help, but it's all the surrounding touches too, characters and stakes. That's why the X2 shot is the highest rank. It literally changes the end of that movie and leads to a whole ton of guilt for Cyclops. That's why, even though this Doomsday shot in the classic costume looks like it could be S tier, with such a crowded field of characters, I remain skeptical whether this is going to be anything close to the renaissance Cyclops enjoyed in the cartoon revival.
To me, my X-Men.
But I hope you enjoyed this trip through the X-Men movies, looking at all the ways the OPTIC BLAST changed over the years. This was admittedly a totally self-indulgent video. I'm not sure how many of you are still here at the end, but that's okay. I love this stuff. And if you found some entertainment as well, please go ahead and like the video, give me a sub, check out my Wolverine video, go to my other channel if you like soundtracks. I'm just so happy for you to be here while I get to geek out over special effects. I go by Rick Online, and thanks so much for... Oh, God. See, I seriously can't read. Oh, thanks so much for watching. I gotta wear contacts again. That's what I gotta do.